Hello and welcome to The Only Way is Beastly. Today we'll be showing you a series of pictures from when me and my brother did a little trip down to Wiltshire to view the absolutely stunning history that's all around that environment. To start off, we went to Avebury, as you can see with this opening picture here. The Avebury complex, we did go to about half of it. Some of it we didn't have time to do because we only went down for 3 days and there's so much to see and so little time. So we will start off with our slideshow of the Avebury complex itself, and then we'll move on to our other glorious finds from the hottest summer since the 70s, I think it was. Okay, so the Avebury complex, it's one of the principal ceremonial sites in Neolithic Britain that we can still visit today, and it was built and altered over many centuries from 2850 BC up until 2200 BC, and it's still one of the largest and most undoubtedly the most complex of Britain's surviving Neolithic henge monuments, and it is absolutely stunning, as you will see from these photos. Okay, so the exact sequence and construction of the banks, ditches and stone circles at Avebury is still not completely understood, but there have been limited excavations and more recent aerial geophysical surveys which have indicated that other features may have once existed inside the enclosure itself. And so, of course, it's therefore quite likely that you may have had timber circles, even structures that would have originally filled the area within the bank and ditch. So, obviously, we're inside the circle here, but this is true across other henges across Britain that have been dug out and excavated so far. At some stage, 2 avenues of stones were also built, linking the Great Henge with other ceremonial sites of Beckhampton and Overton Hill. The huge man-made mound of Silbury Hill, which we will see later on in the video, stands not far away and is broadly contemporary with these monuments as well. So the length of time over which the Great Henge itself and its 2 avenues were built is so long that it suggests a community's relationship with its environment may have gradually altered. Changing rituals may have been the driving force for the building of new monuments and their eventual abandonment around 1800 BC. So it wasn't actually, well, it doesn't seem like it was in use for that much of a time, in all honesty. In the Middle Ages, the stones may have been associated with pagan and devil worship, and many were either buried or sadly destroyed. So later building and agricultural improvements led to others being removed, which again is very sad. But records and maps indicate that early antiquarians such as John Aubrey and William give us some clues as to its further layout. The appearance of the site today, however, owes much to Alexander Kellier, I'm not quite sure I'm pronouncing that name right, to a fortune made by the famous Kellier marmalade. He brought the site and cleared away the buildings and re-erected many stones in the late 30s. And it is thanks to Alexander Kellier that we are still able to visit this fantastic site of Avebury today. It is free to enter, it's a glorious site. I'd highly recommend it to anyone to visit. It's beautiful, it's a World Heritage Site. History is the most important lesson we can all learn. Okay, so welcome to Silbury Hill. This was the next stop on our little tour of Wiltshire. So Silbury Hill itself is the largest artificial prehistoric mound in Europe, probably built over a short period between 2470 BC to 2350 BC. And it's one of the most intriguing monuments in the prehistoric landscape of the Avebury World Heritage Site. So we don't know what its purpose is or the meaning for the late Neolithic people who built it, but its enduring presence in the landscape has inspired many myths and legends as people have sought to explain its purpose. Now, the hill itself stands at about 30 metres high and 160 metres wide, and its construction is estimated to have involved about 4 million man-hours of work. 500,000 tonnes of material, mostly chalk, was used to create it. But the monument we see today was not conceived and built in a single campaign, but enlarged over several generations. Perhaps different people brought soil and chalk from their own neighbouring lands, bringing communities together. And of course, over time, the project became more ambitious with huge quantities of chalk dug from the surrounding ditch and the mound. Now, The unfortunate legacy of this is that the mound has long been an archaeological enigma, no doubt spurred by stories of rich burials. Antiquarians and archaeologists have dug at least 3 separate tunnels into the centre, and of course none of the tunnels was fully backfilled, leaving an unfortunate legacy. In May 2000, a full consequence of this was made clear when a 14-metre deep crater opened up at the summit, and of course this was all filled in and repaired. Hello and welcome to Woodhenge. Woodhenge is an atmospheric Neolithic site built probably around 2300 BC. It was originally believed to be the remains of a large burial mound surrounded by a bank and ditch, almost completely destroyed by ploughing, but aerial photography detected rinsing dark spots within a crop of wheat, which is how it was discovered. So when the site was excavated, these dark spots proved to be empty sockets that had formerly held large upright timbers. And the timbers themselves, there seems to have been like a third ring that seemed to have been larger and more deeply set than the others. So the posts may have been uprights for a larger roofed building or a small courtyard, or a light well in the centre of the site itself. Of course, it's always quite possible that the site was completely open to the sky with the posts carved and painted like totem poles, but for its purpose, it's impossible to know for certain that what the rings of timbers were for. One clue was the discovery at the centre of the site of the burial of a 3-year-old child whose skull had been split open with an axe, apparently a sacrificial victim. So a structure similar to Woodhenge may have stood at the centre of Stonehenge before the Great Stone Circle and Triathlons were erected. So traces of 2 more have been found within the large enclosure known as Dorrington Walls, which lies 230 feet north of Woodhenge site itself. So this is the grave that is at the centre of the site. As you can see, it has been adorned with garlands, and it is still considered a place of burial for the person that does lie underneath, obviously still surrounded by the site of Woodhenge itself, although it is now, of course, small concrete posts which do indicate where the posts would have originally sat in the landscape itself. Okay, so welcome to the finale of our video here. We have arrived at Stonehenge, and in the background there you can see some of the amazing Bronze Age and prehistoric burial mounds that are there. Stonehenge is perhaps the world's most famous prehistoric monument. It was built obviously in several stages. The first monument was an early henge monument itself, built about 5,000 years ago, and the unique stone circle was erected in the late Neolithic period around 2,500 BC. In the early Bronze Age, many burial mounds were built nearby. Today, with Avebury, Stonehenge forms the heart of a unique World Heritage Site, and with a unique concentration of prehistoric monuments itself. Now, before Stonehenge was built, the earliest structures known in the immediate area are 4 or 5 pits, 3 of which appear to have held large pine totem pole-like posts erected in the Mesolithic period. Now, that was roughly between 8,500 BC and 7,000 BC. It's not known how these posts relate to the later monument of Stonehenge itself. At this time, when much of the rest of southern England was largely covered by woodland, the chalk downland in the area of Stonehenge may have been an unusually open landscape. It has been possible that this is why it's become the site of a Neolithic monument complex. So the complex itself, it is, pardon me, the complex itself is included in the causewayed enclosure at Robin Hood's Ball, and 2 Cursus monuments or rectangular earthworks, or the Greater Stonehenge and Lesser Cursus, several long barrows, all dating from the centuries around 3,500 BC. Now, the presence of these monuments probably influenced the later location of Stonehenge itself. Now, it is possible that features such as the heel stone and the low mound known as North Barrow were the early components of Stonehenge, but the earliest known major event was the construction of a circular ditch with an inner and outer bank, built around 3000 BC. This enclosed an area of roughly 100 metres in diameter and had 2 entrances. It's an early form of henge monument, and within the bank and ditch were possibly some timber structures, and set just inside the bank were 56 pits, known as the Aubrey holes. There has been much debate about what stood in these holes. The consensus for many years has been that they held upright timber posts, but recently an idea has re-emerged that some of them may have held stones. So within and around the Aubrey holes, and also in the ditch, people buried cremations. About 64 cremations have been found, and perhaps as many as 150 individuals were originally buried at Stonehenge, making it the largest late Neolithic cemetery in the British Isles. In 2500 BC, the stones were set up in the centre of the monuments. Two types of stone are used at Stonehenge, the larger saracens and the smaller blue stones. Now, the saracens were erected in two concentric arrangements, an inner horseshoe and an outer circle, and the blue stones were set up between them in a double arc. Probably at the same time that the stones were being set up at the centre of the monument, the saracens close to the entrance were raised together with the four station stones on the periphery. Around 200 to 300 years later, the central blue stones were rearranged to form a circle and inner oval, which was again later altered to form a horseshoe. The earthwork avenue was also built at this time, connecting Stonehenge with the River Avon, and one of the last prehistoric activities at Stonehenge was the digging around the stone settings of two rings of concentric pits, so-called Y and Z holes. Radiocarbon dated by antlers within them dated them between 1800 BC and 1500 BC. They may have been intended for a rearrangement of the stones that was never actually completed. After Stonehenge was built, the stone settings at Stonehenge were built at the time of great change within prehistory, just as new styles of beaker pottery and the knowledge of metalworking, together with a transition to the burial of individuals and grave goods, was arriving from the continent. So from around 2400 BC, a well-furnished beaker graves, such as that of the Amesbury Archer, are found nearby. In the early Bronze Age, one of the greatest concentrations of round barrows in Britain was built in the area at Stonehenge. Many barrow groups appear to have been deliberately located on hilltops visible from Stonehenge itself, such as those on the King Barrow Ridge and the particularly rich burials of Normanton Down Cemetery. Four of the saracens at Stonehenge were adorned with hundreds of carvings depicting axe heads and, of course, a few daggers. They appear to have been bronze axes of the Averton Down type, dating from around 1750 BC to 1500 BC. Perhaps these axes were a symbol of power or status within early Bronze Age society, or were related in some way to nearby round barrow burials. From the Middle Bronze Age, less communal effort went into the construction of ceremonial monuments such as Stonehenge, and more on activities such as creation of fields. In the Iron Age, probably around 700 BC, a major hill fort, later known as Vespasian's Camp, was constructed a mile and a quarter east of Stonehenge, overlooking the River Avon. Stonehenge appears to have been frequently visited in the Roman period from AD 43 onwards, so since many Roman objects have been found there. Recent excavations raise the possibility that this was a place of ritual importance to the Romano-British people, and the small town of Amesbury is likely to have been established around the 6th century AD at a crossing point of the Avon, and a decapitated man, possibly a criminal, buried at Stonehenge in that Saxon period too. So that's where I'm going to leave it. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more from The Only Way is Beastly. Take care, guys. Thanks for watching.